Okay, so I just went ahead and found something a little bit new that I didn't know about before about the photographic artist. So if you just go back here, here's my photo. And again, there was a paper that was written in January 2023 stating essentially that this is a picture that these people who are forensic anthropologists, scientists, you look them up, they've been, just when I knew them, they're writing like 10 scientific papers a year. So they're extremely well known and it's free. Click the PDF and you'll see that they really believe, especially when they did the morphological comparison, there weren't really any differences. But it's just, you can see there's the back of the photo. And it doesn't go very much into the provenance, so that's why I'm always researching more of that. And so in the back of the carte de visite this is taken by Gowan Weaver, who verified that it was authentic in March 2020. And you can actually read about that. I changed this a little bit so that you can. But here's his report on the top of the page. Okay, and he thinks this is not Bibbins' work. We looked at Bibbins' work, we looked at Lucien Foster's work, especially Emma Smith's carte de visite that was copied from her daguerreotype holding baby David Hiram Smith, who was born in November 1844, and he's still a baby. The only daguerreotypist known in Nauvoo was Lucien Foster, and Joseph Smith III stated in 1910, his March letter to the Salt Lake Tribune, that it was Lucien Foster that he thinks took his dad's daguerreotype. Okay, and then you're seeing this background that really looks so similar, but this was printed in Newark, Kendall County, Illinois. But if you look at, do I show it up here? Right there. So the guy who printed it died in Plano, Kendall County, Illinois, but he also lived in Newark for a time as well. So I don't know when he moved to Plano. But I remember saying in my last videos that maybe he just died in Plano. Did he live there? Now I know that he did live there, so I'm going to explain that really quick. I'm not going to tell you everything I've talked about before ever, but so I mean, this is the headstone that states in their system that he died in Plano, Kendall County, Illinois, but he was buried in the Millington, Newark cemetery, so I can show you that he died here in Little Rock Township. So these are the boundaries of Little Rock Township. I can click on that here. But in the earlier records for J.S. Bibbins, it mentions in the family history he lived in Newark, but the census records mention Big Grove Township, but that includes Newark. And then Kendall County includes Newark, where the person who printed the photo lived in the 1860s, and then you can see that, you just research anything about Joseph Smith III, you will see that so this is a long article, this is like near the end right here, but they were talking about the Saints Herald and how it started in 1863 in Plano, Kendall County, Illinois. So this is where the man who printed my picture died. Okay. But Joseph Smith III took over and moved there from 1866 to 1881. Okay, but I actually found, so here is Elmer Dixon compiled all these newspaper articles about Kendall County. And so this is the Kendall County record, June 22nd, 1892. And so if we scroll down here, now we see some evidence that he really, they're not saying he lived in Newark, they're saying he lived in Little Rock, but that's the township. So township. And J.S. Bibbins, he died there in 1891, and he was about 70 years old. And he came there in 1840. Other records say 1838 on the Kendall website. And so here it states Little Rock. So again, didn't want to click on that one. Click on something that'll show you. I think this is a good website. Okay. So here they're stating Little Rock Township, which is different than the county. And you will see their map that shows. There you can look at full screen. I think there is a city named Little Rock, but the township, it does include Plano. Really looking at this, you just don't see any other. There's Little Rock Road. And it goes all the way to the Fox River. Just doesn't go past it. And there's a Big Rock city. But I don't see an actual town called Little Rock, but it's but they stated. So this is the township. Okay, you can see them explaining that. It's a suburb of Chicago. Little Rock Township is in Kendall County. So it's still just very, very small. And so Joseph Smith III and the organized church didn't stay there. They are now based in Missouri, and he moved to Missouri near the end of his life. And Alex went there first. But the sons of Joseph Smith, Alex, one of his daughters, was born here. Alexander Smith, the brother. So Joseph Smith III was the oldest son of Joseph and Emma that lived to adulthood. And then, you know, we got Frederick was older, but he died at 26. So he never really left Nauvoo. And then Alex and David Hiram lived till basically elderly age. And they, for a time, both helped Joseph Smith III run the organized church. Or they had missions. They just were were a part of this movement. And so you can research that, but that's kind of a big deal. So I've added that to the first page. I'll add it here. That, yeah, J.S. Bibbins really, he did move there at some point before 1891. And so I'll just show you some census records so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is for Joseph Smith III. You can see he's named as editor, like that article that I mentioned before I can go back to, but born in Ohio. Now you can see by 1870 he's married to Bertha. And again, Bertha, I think, looks a lot more like the Larson Lockett photo than Joseph Smith III. Like, she looks like a female version of that Lockett photo, just the rounding outside of the corners of their mouth. It just rounds out a lot. Really light eyebrows, very little bit darker curly hair. And she was 100% Norwegian. So the Lockett photo looks almost just like her. I think it's a Norwegian man that was related to her. Whether it was Mads Madison, someone that knows more than me said they didn't necessarily think that, but I mean, the picture that there is out there is like the most pixelated picture ever of Mads, and he's a lot older. But his face looks a lot longer, but I could see some unique features that did match. But the shape of your face is not really going to change that much when you get older, but Joseph, Robinson was a gardener. He was from Ireland, lived with them. Okay. Yeah, I see that a lot, especially when I'm looking at Kendall County, of a gardener living with them. But, so this is Joseph Smith III in 1870, but he moved to Plano in 1866. The reorganized church, their church was in Plano. So I can click out of that. But you see that Little Rock is the township that includes Plano that I just showed you. And then here you see Plano in the 1880 census for Joseph Smith III. Okay, so you see he's 10 years older. I don't think I've actually clicked this before. Let's see if it'll light up. A lot of times, yeah, they lit it up right there. So that's what's really great about Ancestry website. Now he's a minister / editor, and he's still married to Bertha. So he's 10 years older at 47, and so now the census record is stating Plano instead of Big Grove. Okay. And in another video I did see that J.S. Bibbins had a neighbor named William Smith when he was in Newark, but and then we can just look up J.S. Bibbins, like I did before. So he was older, 21. So I don't know if there are any anything that's going to come up as Little Rock or... Okay. Yeah, so this is pulling up Find a Grave that I mentioned before. Plano, Kendall County, Illinois. So this is just going to show you Find a Grave that I showed you before. And that this states, that he was buried in Millington, Newark Cemetery. And his wife was buried there, his children were buried there, so it makes sense. Because his wife died well before he did, like a decade before I think I was found out. See, it's just taking you to that website that I showed you before. Born in Wilkes-Barre, Luzerne County, 1821. But then you see this census record, even though around this time, even the death of his father, in historical records for like the Lathrop, Alice Lathrop was her maiden name, it would state that she then was living with her son in Newark, but all the records keep saying Big Grove. That's a township. Okay, so there's Joseph. He's 28 years old. See, these years are lining up with him being born in 1821. His father is a man that knew Emma Smith, and he served. I mean, he was a Methodist circuit rider in Susquehanna, Harmony, Pennsylvania, right when Emma Smith was like 8 years old and converted and helped her father to allow prayer in the home, is what they say. But she was outside praying, but that's what Methodists did, was pray outside. But I believe they converted the father. The father overheard her prayer, and it softened his heart. He just wasn't for organized religion. So, yes, this is J.S. Bibbins, and then you can pull up and look at the 1860 census record. You'll see he married Elizabeth Lott in 1851, and he was quite a bit older. He was almost 30. And he was, old enough to know how to operate a camera when Joseph Smith was still alive. But I do think that the daguerreotype was taken by Lucy and Foster in Nauvoo, and that the sons happened to be living in Plano. And either they or Emma, I think. So he's still saying Big Grove in 1880, but by 1890 he's living in, so 1891. So I want to see if I can find like the 1890 census, so we can go up here and just look at just census. Okay. I haven't done this before. We'll see what happens there. We can try narrowing it down, but I never was able to find anything later than that as far as census records go, so. But either way, at some point he did move to live in Plano. I just wonder if he was just visiting. I'm like, why does it say Plano, but he's buried in Newark? But then I realized that his wife and several of his children, it seems like, died very young. And I don't think he was rich, because the headstone just has a lot of names on it. So if you look at it, you can see Elizabeth, his wife, Joseph. She died in 1877. He died in 1891. So she was buried first, and then Florence is just put on there. But if you look at other records, there are several other children noted, and then grandmother is put on this one stone. So, and even today, I guess it's very expensive for people to get a headstone. And this looks pretty nice. So they trying to find someone that can write this or do this. I wonder when this was to be actually made. Florence died in 1901, so maybe it was the 1900s when they actually made this. But anyway, but his wife and I think some of them much younger children. I think there were a lot more children before. If we go ahead and look at 1860, 70. Not that it's not relevant to this, but 1880, so his wife has already died. She died in 1877. So at this point, he's just got Charlotte and Florence. So, we know there's Charlotte. And then Charlotte is mentioned a lot more. So I wonder if Charlotte moved to Plano. But I don't know what her married name would have been. So we can look up Charlotte Plano. Bibbins, Plano. Let's see what happens there. I don't think she was like 25, but okay. gosh. Okay, when was she born? Making a really exciting video today. Just super curious where she... Oh, okay, can we just start searching her information? So she was 6 years old, so she was born 1854. Okay. So, yeah, now we can look her up. We can see, okay, there's that census record we already looked at. '70, 1880. There we go, so we can see. There we go, yeah, she was 32 and she married Thomas Boyd. So Charlotte, now we'll change this to Boyd. Just died in 1905. They're just mentioning Millington. Okay, so Charlotte had her headstone because she got married. Florence didn't. I've just always wondered what happened to them. But there was a little boy named Elisha. There's just no death record, but for children they just didn't do anything like that back then. Okay, well. Yeah, this is getting, there's way too many options there. Where do we find 1905 that she died? 40, forgotten. It's right there. So when did she die? Oh, 1905. Okay. So this is if you want to get it more concise, you can put and then Millington was just away. We'll see if this narrows down. I'm just curious if she ever lived in Plano, but yeah, that's probably her. So then they've got her in Aurora, Kane, Illinois. So maybe he just moved to Plano just because Newark it just didn't grow, basically. Still hasn't. It's extremely small, so maybe he didn't go live with one of his daughters, but there she is in family tree. I don't want to open that up right now. Looking. Oh well. I'm not gonna continue searching for that, but we do know that J.S. Bibbins, you didn't need to see all that. He was noted being in Little Rock and then living in Plano. So that puts him 0 miles away from where the sons of Joseph Smith lived until 1881. So I don't know how long or when they lived in the exact same town or if he was just visiting there a lot. But it does appear that he really lived there. So I kind of had a question if he really just lived there, but he was buried in Newark. Was he just staying with one of his children, maybe? But I think that's kind of a big deal. He's the one that printed the photo that I think is of Joseph Smith. And the sons of Joseph Smith lived in that town at the time it was printed. You know, that's huge. That is really huge. And so, but this does state Newark is where this was printed, but you can see Newark, Plano, extremely close. But yeah, this is what changed so that you don't have such a huge thing that was dropping down and hiding half the page. But yeah, I added all that to the top of the page so you can read and just see a little bit more here. There's, Little Rock, and then J.S. Bibbins is mentioned in Little Rock. Although he did live for sure in Newark, and the picture was printed in Newark, but he also did live in Plano for the close of his life. So I think that's really interesting. So it really puts him in the same spot as the sons to run into them. So even though this is 1860s, according to Gowan Weaver in his report, but that's the style of the paper. And because cabinet cards became a lot more popular in the 1870s, you can look up cabinet cards. So it was after 1870, so those were just a lot larger. And they got a lot more stylized. But they were printing out much larger pictures, whereas my picture is like that big. They were printing like full body shots and just filling up the whole, But the cartridge visites did exist till the 1900s. And then cabinet cards were invented in the 1870s. So it was more like the late 1800s. There's similar card type photographs as card visites. But if your old photo is 4x6 in size, then chances are it is a cabinet card, meaning it's just bigger. Style of photograph first introduced in 1863 by Windsor and Bridge. The cabinet card is a photographic print mounted on cardstock. The cabinet card got its name from its suitability for displays in parlors, especially in cabinets. and it was popular medium for family portraits. So you could put it in a cabinet and just set it up. Since it wasn't a daguerreotype, you could just show it, whereas daguerreotypes you did not leave open. It was in a closed case that closed like a book, and it had glass on it. And so again, if you read our paper, you can see how easily damaged one of Lucien Foster's daguerreotypes got of MS Smith. You can hardly see any detail on the original, but this is the copy that looks like an 1860s carte de visite, although I have not analyzed that myself. It looks almost exact same as this. Looks very similar. But Julia Murdoch Smith, she put that in her family album. So, again, I apologize that the names are, it's backwards, the credits there, but it was being put in Polish and then in English, and so it's okay. But at least permissions, respects were given. But it's just everything that I found out as I research more, I really think it's a truth that this is a photo of Joseph Smith, because everything I found out was just so easy to find. I'd pray and it would come to my mind to look up MS Smith's photo when I was so worried about this being a carte de visite. And does that disprove it because it's not a daguerreotype? And then the Spirit told me to look up MS Smith's photo and found this. I'm like, well, this picture is from the 1840s. But this type of cabinet, or carte de visite, CDV, is 1860s. So the actual product was 1860s. This product is probably 1845. Because he's not a newborn, but he's not a toddler. So that's basically why they give that date. They're trying to age the little boy in her arms, and then it's written Mrs. Joseph Smith and son Dave. So if you do read through this, we note that, and pop down collars did happen, and I've mentioned and talked about how the church history department hasn't been any help at all. When I contacted them in 2017, I just was put in touch with someone that just kept arguing, and then when I went there physically, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to look at stuff I'd been wanting, that I knew I had to go in person to look at the microfilm in person. And they brought some guy over that now I think I do know who it was. It's just like, what do you think? I'm going to help you prove this. I'm going to help you prove this. I'm like, you're not going to do anything. Like, who are you? I should have said, who are you? Because I think I know who it is now, because I just hadn't really looked at what that person looked like. I just didn't know who this person was. I think that was possibly the same person that was just trying to be a forensic scientist, trying to argue about the ears. Like, what's not him because your guy is like attached earlobes. And just kept arguing. It was just so negative and kept trying, but they couldn't disprove it. So everything they brought up just made me work harder and find out more. If they had not have done that, I would not have found out half the stuff I did, though. So I'm grateful for that. Because they also gave me resources. They gave me that paper from the 1960s, even though half of the theories in it are just not true because they did not have our LDS newspapers. And the main focus was on that painting. He did not know Joseph Smith III agreed with Junius F. Wells. William B. McCarl didn't know. Because it was the 1960s. They didn't have the archives of the RLDS Church at BYU in the 1960s. Things were still too fresh. And I think some of the sons of Joseph Smith III were alive. They weren't sharing stuff. It just came more in the 1990s. That relations, because President Hinckley, just was a good communicator. And they just started to get along more. And so Utah and them have gotten along a lot better. And shared a lot of things, bought things, And then with the whole Mark Hoffman thing, they traded for some very important things. So they did buy a lot of things, unfortunately, from Mark Hoffman. And it makes me sad that Utahns, I mean, they trusted Mark Hoffman, and they keep trusting people that they shouldn't, or people that don't know what the heck they're doing. You think they would trust people that are well trained in certain things, but they just don't. So it just, as far as arguing, said that my guy had attached earlobes. So it's not him, because look at this profile painting at Joseph Smith by Maudsley, who he couldn't have messed up that much. Shows a detached earlobes. Well, I researched those type of earlobes, and I was sure that David Hiram had very attached earlobes. He really looks like he had very attached earlobes, but when you look at the profile, his earlobes look just like his father's profile by Maudsley, where they're just sort of floppy and hanging, and they're not fully attached. Like you're saying, this was an attached earlobe. I'm like, it rounds. It's not. Emma definitely had attached earlobes, but in some of Maudsley's work, she looks like she's detached earlobes. But does this look like a detached, or this almost looks like an attached earlobe? They're really, really trying to just prove it, right? But Alex, that really looks like an attached earlobe, because you can see sort of this skin coming down like that. But shadows can be deceiving as far as understanding and being able to tell. And then there you go. I just said I thought Alex had it. Unless his beard is causing them to look detached. They look very detached. That's sort of what that guy was arguing that attached, and they just kept arguing about attached and detached earlobes. I'm like, you're a historian. Are you a forensic scientist? I'm going to go find a forensic scientist, and they did. But here's David Hiram. You really looks very attached. It doesn't look like the earlobes are detached until you look here. It's just like, oh, now you see this line and a shadow, so it really looks like floppy detached earlobes. But this is David Hiram. Someone said it was Joseph Smith III on the Saints Inscripted. I was like, no. These are lighter eyes, and David Hiram had lighter eyes. But Joseph Smith III had very dark brown eyes. So they're arguing about that, arguing about the clothing, saying I had already sent them the photo of the vest that it just matches. And it was important enough that these forensic scientists put it in there. Like, well, it is a matching vest. But just because it's, that's not unique enough to say 100%, right? But all these little things are too unique, in my opinion. But here's, like this is plaid. They tried to say that my guy had a plaid vest. This is plaid. But in my picture, that doesn't look plaid. It's very, very just striped, but it's got these interesting curves. So I upped the contrast a lot. And I kept thinking this was part of the tie, but that could be the watch fob. But you just look at this bow tie, just how you see it's wrapped around the neck and it's sort of wrinkling the same way. And it's a big fat bow tie. I just think there was a lot more material with this white one, and just how this vest went in, you could tuck it in. This vest, you couldn't tuck it in. But that is Joseph Smith's vest. And you can see that in the Ensign article here. So just everything I found is absolutely amazing. And I'll just keep researching, but there's just nothing. The forensic scientists could not disprove it, whereas when they looked at the Larson Locker photo, they're like, no way. We're not even gonna spend an hour analyzing. When you see major differences, it is not that person. And they saw major differences. There's no apparent likeness, so we're not writing a report on it. I don't know if other people would, just to humor people. Someone might. Although I've heard Curtis Weber wrote about it. But like a real forensic scientist, I don't know, might be. So, and then that's the vest. You see it's very striped, but it's got sort of this design, and you can see sort of this curve going on in certain things, but then you're sort of seeing these cross striations on this vest. I was trying to explain it, and they're like, oh, well, then it's plaid, it's 1850s, didn't exist before. They weren't even being logical. They were just really trying to, like you're playing basketball, just slamming the ball down and just popping it. Just like, no, game's over, done. They just wanted to they couldn't. They really, really tried. And I just spent $300 2 weeks before I talked to them. And I knew nothing. So they were teaching me. I was suddenly learning about Maudsley's artwork. Did I talk about Maudsley's artwork in summer 2017? No. Did I talk about the forward-facing painting at all? Like, did I know anything? No. I didn't know that was from life. I didn't know about the 1910 letter by the sun. I knew nothing summer of 2017 other than that this picture looked like the death mask. When I initially for sure thought that just because of the hair, I fell into that group, the hair of the spiritist picture. I thought that was him, but I forgot about the hair. And I never cared about the hairline, but man, if you do, go check out the hairline and look at the oldest photos of the death mask. The death mask changed. It really, really changed. Is it gonna... Is it going to show the page about hair? Yeah, well then we need to change. Because there's a whole page about the hairline. But, the drop-down menu showed that page. Artistic history. His vest. Clothing styles. Okay, but yeah, there's a whole page about the hairline, and you can look at the oldest photos by Carter that I could find of the death mask, and it really was very, very different. So, okay, but yeah, I'll stop this video because I made it really long, but hey, yeah, no one's been able to disprove it, and they've tried. And I just keep finding more stuff that just really places this guy in the same town as the Suns. And in the same county, just mere miles away. In the city that had all the train tracks. I was reading about that last night too. So New York had the train tracks going right along there. So Emma would have gone there and probably traveled across the river and gone into Plano. She could have walked the 10 miles. Her age, I'm sure they went and got her a carriage. But, walking 5-10 miles is not impossible in a day, for Joseph Smith III or J.S. Bibbins. So if he had a little photo car, which is a wagon, he could have been promoting his work in Plano, or he could have been promoting it off the train tracks. He could have taken photos or copied a photo just in his little car if he had one. There's just a lot more to research, and I'm just going to keep doing it because I think there's a lot to be found out. Have a good day.